should listen to today's episode if you've ever been stuck fixing a bad design after winning a project, you're concerned about the skilled labor shortage in construction, or you want to understand how AI can reduce waste and boost productivity without replacing your team. My guest is Francesco Iorio, the CEO of Augmenta, an AI company reimagining how we design buildings. Let's jump right into the conversation. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Frio, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Please give the audience just a very short introduction into who you are and your company, please.
Absolutely. So my name is Francesco Iorio. Frio is my nickname. So I'm the CEO of Augmenta. We are an artificial intelligence company working in the construction industry.
Excellent. So AI is obviously it's a huge hype thing in a certain way at the moment. There's a lot of skepticism in terms of the applicability of it. There's simple ways you can use it. There's complex ways that you can use it. One of the ways that you guys are focused is on addressing labor shortages. So how can AI-powered tools like yours help mitigate the skilled labor shortage in the construction industry?
That's a great question, Eric. So one of the critical skills that we see as a bottleneck actually today, right? So is even more than in the field, in the construction site, is actually back in the office, right? So where buildings are designed. And design is such a critical component of modern construction process. And a lot of times when we talk to contractors, general contractors, trades, etc., right? So demand for higher and higher level of detail in the building models, in the building designs, right? So coupled with the need to prefabricate more, to actually kind of use more offsite resources, right? So makes really digital design kind of a critical skill to have. Unfortunately, we really live in the reality actually where not many people actually want to do that for a living, right? So, and the folks who have been expert electricians, plumber, kind of mechanical systems engineers and designers, right? So, several of them actually are retiring, from kind of long careers, right? So, and the new people actually entering the market are fewer, right? So, and we are trying to essentially help the process of refreshing the workforce actually with artificial intelligence. And it literally is in our name, right? So we started the company, it's called Augmenta, specifically to essentially enhance the capabilities of the people who are still in the industry or actually, interested in actually kind of joining back.
So that's interesting because a typical complaint that I hear from people is that we won the project, but the design is crap. And now we've got to work it out. And as a result of that crap design, we're having all these challenges. And from what you're saying, Augmenta is designed to address that specifically by using AI to enhance the design process so that you get a better design at the kickoff of the project?
There's multiple sides to it. You're spot on. So we're actually aiming to perform kind of two kind of main kind of services, if you will, right? So with this technology. One is to bring literally kind of construction knowledge, trades knowledge, directly into the design tools, right? So this is something that has never been kind of done before, kind of not really, right? So these tools actually have been designed mostly for architects, right? So, and, sometimes engineers. And so the affordances that they give you are kind of double-edged sword, right? So as in you can design whatever you like, but then it's a very different, task to actually make it, you actually build it. And so by actually capturing construction and trade knowledge directly into these digital tools by virtue of AI, right? So we're trying to actually get to designs that are closer effectively to their real life counterparts and to help actually even folks that only have maybe partial experience that are more junior to actually have that purview, right? So from the get-go, all of that in the shortest possible amount of time.
Okay. So that's interesting, right? Because there's always that tension between, architect, engineer, that's an awesome design, but constructability is another thing. How do you gather the information from construction and bring it into your tool? What's your process for doing that?
That's also really a great question. So it comes in two kind of forms, if you will, at the high level, right? So an artificial intelligence to be useful, it needs to create designs that are understandable, for people, right? So, and that actually follow, let's say, best practices, right? So this is actually particularly challenging of a task actually for AI to do because as other industries, construction is actually very constrained by, building code and by, again, best trade practices, right? So there are kind of not written kind of anywhere, if you will. They're in the minds of people who have, have done actually enough kind of field work to know, right? So, but there's no handbook, right? So the challenge that we have, and that's kind of really kind of where our technology comes in, is the ability to, let's say, absorb information from, let's say, the rule books. So for example, the National Electric Code is it's a federal level book, right? So that explains, in the exacting detail, how you actually have to create an electrical systems, for example, right? So, but on the other hand, is capturing the intent that only results from looking at a design after it's being done, right? So essentially, what decisions have led an expert in the field to, make a particular decision, right? So to route in a particular way, or to kind of stack kind of the conduits in a particular way, right? So, or to decide to actually move something underground, right? So these are nuances that only a combination of learning from existing designs, but at the same time, essentially reading well, right? So the code, right? So the building code itself.
That's interesting. That sounds like a really heavy lift there, that what you're attempting to do. So I hear what you're saying about the designs. I hear what you're saying about the codes. Is there a human element that comes in? What have you guys done in terms of, talking to the folks who are actually installing the work and seeing where that connection is between the codes, the design, and the actual installation?
This is actually really kind of the critical process that is actually very humbling. And for technologies, I actually don't come from the construction industry, right? So
right.
I'm from computer science, so I'm the geek and the nerd in the room, right? So, but it's fascinating to actually talk to experts because, again, you learn a whole lot. So not only we partnered extremely early with people actually from the construction industry, we then kind of lock ourselves, in a box in a room for, a few years and then come up with pretending to teach the industry how to work, right? So we partnered very, very deeply with trades, with engineers, right? Direct from the very start, from day one, right? So, and we learned essentially along the way, kind of what makes a design a good design, what makes a decision a good decision. And so in parallel with learning the building code, like the systematic way of creating kind of designs and making decisions, we learned, let's say, the tools of the trade, again, the nuances that actually make a master electrician in this case, right? So a master electrician.
So how do you know you're asking and answering the right question or solving the right problem?
Oh, it's the folks in this trade are actually very vocal about it. That's an absolute, that's a blessing, right? So as in, we've had a lot of support, and this is fantastic. Not all industries actually operate like this, right? So, but we have seen kind of a true desire for, innovation to start permeating this process. And so we haven't had resistance. And in fact, again, we've had many, many exchanges where we iterate on our systems. We show to, experts in the trade, essentially the output, and then we cycle, right? So we iterate. I'm trying to understand the kind of more and more nuances. Of course, the other side of the cycle is that we hired directly a team of experts who work full time at Augmenta, specifically to provide this feedback, in real time, every day.
That's interesting. So, as you're reimagining design workflows, how does Augmenta's approach differ from traditional CAD tools in terms of design intelligence and constructability?
That's also like a really great question. Like we're very orthogonal, if you will, to the way CAD existed, for the last 50 years, if you will, right? So if you think about it, like as in CAD, as it still exists today, is a fantastic set of digital tools, but it is a amazingly glorified drawing board at the end of it. So it allows people to imagine and design and draw whatever they want, right? So, but that, as I was saying actually earlier, right, is also, the fallacy in the sense that actually starting with something and constructing something is, they're two kind of very different trajectories. So we decided to approach the problem from very different perspective. We started with what a design needs to ultimately do, right? So, and a design ultimately, especially 3D BIM design, needs to be used for procurement, for resource planning, pre-construction, right? So essentially it needs to be used for actual physical work, right? So for, again, a supply chain, so essentially to understand kind of what's necessary to bring to the site and build, right? So instead of starting at the architectural level, we started with the trades. And we started by creating a system that only manipulates kind of real or the digital twin of real parts and pieces, right? So because that's ultimately what the contractor, especially the trades, actually need to go to the site and actually do their work. So what we do is that we have created a workflow that is generative in nature, right? So it's not let's say, a generative or AI appendix to, let's say, traditional CAD tools. Our workflow is entirely generative and essentially progresses from a declaration of intent in kind of pure generative fashion. You ask it what it is that you're after, and the output is the design, right? So that is an embodiment of what you're looking for, right? So
can I interrupt you there just to help me understand? So
100%.
You're asking it. So what immediately popped into my head is that I'm working with ChatGPT, right? And I'm prompting it, and it's producing something as a result of the prompt. Is that what you're describing right there?
It's not quite. Let's say that, it's similar in philosophy, right?
Okay.
But it is not actually quite the same. The reason being that words and typing in a computer, or even actually speaking, is not the fastest or more precise way to convey what you're asking the AI to do in this particular case, right? So the input that our AI takes is a structural model to get a spatial understanding on where things actually are supposed to go or be, right? So they are details from an engineering team that prescribes the amount of electricity that is needed in a particular section of the building. So it's much more in context, if you will, than natural chat, if you will.
Think about the last time you promoted someone into a leadership role and it failed. Why did it fail? I can tell you one reason. People know how to build projects, but they don't know how to build and lead teams of people. Construction comes with its challenges that only insiders truly understand. Generic leadership training doesn't cut it. You need a program to train your leaders built specifically for construction professionals led by an industry expert. And my online course, The Shift, is exactly that course. It has 5 modules. It'll teach your people how to control their calendars and reduce stress and embrace chaos and accomplish their critical tasks. It will teach them the 3 essential messages they have to communicate every day in order to motivate and lead their team effectively. It'll show them how to build and lead a high-performing team, give them a framework for running effective meetings so they'll be able to solve problems in less than an hour, and also give them a higher perspective on their leadership that will enable them to work on the business and on their teams and not get stuck in the weeds micromanaging. So go out to my website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, read all about the course, and then enroll yourself and your leaders in the course, and I guarantee that it will transform your leadership. If it does not, you take the whole course and you didn't get benefit from it, you just send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will cheerfully refund you 100% of your money. I'm really confident this course will transform your leadership. So again, go out to the website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, learn more about the course, and start taking it today. Let me ask you something. When I'm thinking of these tools that a lot of companies use, these software tools, for instance, company A, let's say they're using Procore, and
Yes.
company B is using Procore, right? When it comes to AI systems and AI resources such as Augmenta, what is the relationship going to be between the skill of the user and the effectiveness of the tool?
That's such a great question. Let's say that the skill of the user is applied in 2 different ways, right? So with a generative system, the art is in the stating of the problem.
And just
right?
let me just interrupt you just for the
Absolutely.
sake of myself and the audience. Give us a simple definition of a generative system.
A generative system is a software infrastructure, if you will. It's a software tool, right? So it's as simple as possible, right? So that reacts to your prompts, that reacts to the description of what you're after, of your desires, your goals, right? So, and produces out of thin air, right? So a solution that is compliant to what you requested.
Yep. Okay. I got that.
That's my definition.
That's very good. Thank you. Okay. So back to the question then, and the relationship of the tool to the user, and how the skill of the user will enhance the use of the tool.
That's right. So there are two components to it, right? So one is the mastery of asking the right questions, right? So the way the questions, the problems are posed, right? So influence the quality of the output, right? So, or the precision in which the AI is going to adhere to your requests, if you will, right? So,
Yes.
so there's definitely a skill in there, right? So, and people can hone their skills, and of course, working with an AI is the best way of actually honing the skills, right?
Yes.
So, and essentially creating for yourself a mental model on how it'll react to your requests, right? So,
Yes.
on the other hand, there's also the other kind of very important factor, which is provide feedback to what the AI has done.
Yes, yes.
Right. So that creates kind of virtuous cycle, right? So that makes over time the AI kind of get you more, if you will, right? So or to kind of, let's say, steer it towards what is your way of working or your group's way of working, right? So that's another critical skill, right? So which is, again, describing what it produced is not exactly what you wanted, right? So that's very much an art in that.
So it's interesting. As you were saying that, I got this image of a virtuoso guitar player producing a different sound than someone like myself might produce from a guitar, just because of their skill level and their understanding. As companies are adopting tools like yours or other AI tools, how critical is it in terms of the feedback, the quality of the prompting and the feedback to the responses to the prompting? How critical is it to get senior level people involved in order to make the tool effective for more junior level people?
So I think that, there will be a time where the systems of this kind, and ours included, right? So will be, let's say, proficient enough that there'll be really just nuances necessary, right? So to actually, embody, again, a particular design team's particular requirements, right? Or particular way of working, right? So, but in fact, actually, AI like ours is already being used actually by some of our customers to essentially boost the skills of more junior people, right? So at the level that is beyond what they can do already, because the system already has some of this, let's say, larger expertise, if you will.
Yes.
And so they can learn from the AI just as much as the AI can learn from the more senior tradespeople.
So it's almost like someone who has coming to a computer that has all the sounds on it and learns how to manipulate the sounds in order to create a song, and they can use a software as opposed to learning the actual mechanism itself. So that's interesting to think about.
Precisely.
Let me ask you this. One of the concerns that people have when they're using AI, and particularly when it comes to, construction companies in a competitive environment, I use your tool and I bring my insights to the table, and my insights are actually what set me apart from my competition. And if I share that information with the tool, how is that information then used to enhance the tool? And then wouldn't that pass on some of my proprietary information and skill to my competitors who might be using the same tool? How do you handle those sort of objections and those sort of concerns?
That's also a really good question. So artificial intelligence, again, relies, entirely on data, right? So our system itself actually is half a machine learning brain, that forms, let's say, command and control operations, and a very prescriptive mathematical engine that literally, selects and places each individual part, right, very precisely, right? So there are these kind of two brains, if you will, right? So the creative side of the brain, which is the machine learning one, again, is based on data, right? So what we do is that we have, let's say, a data pool that is used to set the rising tide, to set essentially the basic standard that the AI will produce, will perform on, essentially for everybody, right? Going forward, right? So as actually time passes and actually users use our systems, right? So we will have the ability to federate. Federating actually means essentially restricting the availability of data to specific instances of the machine learning model, right? So what this means is that all the feedback, all the projects, all the purview, if you will, that a particular organization or design team provides, right? So can be restricted to the AI that works with them and not necessarily everybody, right? So of course, we want a system that grows in its capabilities over time for everyone, right? So we will, of course, ask, customers to share at least a part of the information that they share with us, actually, to make it better for everybody, right? So, but it's also going to be possible for them to keep their secret sauce, if you will, right?
Yes.
So,
how do you remove the mystique of AI so that people understand that in essence, it's a more sophisticated tool that is going to help them take the next step in making their businesses more successful?
I think it varies by organization, right? So let's say that folks we talk to are extremely practical. So for them, the result is actually ultimately what matters, right? So if they can get a leg up by using artificial intelligence or anything else, right? So that makes their life easier, right? So it's a welcome change, right? So of course, there's actually a level of mystique. Ultimately, I think the mystique is actually going to be, out of the picture once actually people realize the value. Once they have, testimonial, when they can talk to their friends in, maybe, friendly companies or competitors, just announce, how well it worked for them, right? So that, actually, again, in my opinion, on a very kind of practical, kind of grounded industry like construction, right? So is ultimately what's going to make the difference.
As you're working with construction companies, we're sort of on the bleeding edge still of AI.
Yes.
And so everyone's learning right now. You're learning, the contractors are learning.
Definitely.
What characterizes the construction companies that you think are going to be most successful in innovating and applying these types of technologies? What's different from that as far as they're concerned in comparison with other companies that perhaps aren't quite there?
I think it's mostly about attitude, right? So the attitude actually comes from people at the end of the day, right? So this is indeed bleeding edge technology, just as you said, right? So we see early adopters are really a characteristic of specific people, right? Like some people are intrigued, they understand the opportunities, they understand the threats, right? And the risks as well, right? And so they're just naturally kind of more prone to taking a risk, if you will. Yeah. And it has nothing to do, for example, with the size of an organization. So we see, risk takers or kind of technology savvy people or kind of illuminated leadership, like regardless of the size, right? So, but it's really a characteristic that is embodied into special people, into specific people. Some people just react to these opportunities faster, just more quickly. And some others are just more cautious. Again, when things actually work, don't break them, right? So some people actually kind of go beyond that and see that as an opportunity and embrace it.
So you said that your background is not in construction. Tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got into the construction field.
Absolutely. So my background is in a field of computer science actually called high performance computing. So it's when you use computers are as big as a small building, right? So to do, some complex analysis, complex simulation, right? So, and this was actually used to perform, oil and gas exploration or modeling the ocean currents, right? So, or the financial markets, right? So I've accumulated over the years of my career, essentially experience in managing very large computational power, for specific, scientific applications. So then I actually spent about 11 years at Autodesk, which is one of the incumbents actually in the field of, software for the construction industry, computer-aided design, right? So, and I led in there the so-called generative design initiative, right? So that was actually kind of mostly aimed at advanced manufacturing, mechanical engineering, like aerospace or automotive, right? So, but I essentially understood from early days, essentially the opportunity and the affordances that large amount of computational power applied to these problems actually could bring. So that program was actually, quite successful in essentially kind of waking up the manufacturing industry to the ability of artificial intelligence and design computation, right? So, but then again, Autodesk is very large in construction. And so I started absorbing the construction industry by literally living in the firm, right? So, and I actually quite quickly realized that the opportunity in construction is just so much bigger, right? So, yes. like the built environment, touches everyone's lives, right? So, yep. so deeply, right? So, and environmental impacts of the built environment is colossal, right? So, and the delta, if you will, between the state of the art and the opportunity of bringing artificial intelligence is also immense. And so, I decided to take matters into my own hands and pursue it, right? So, but I've been around people, in construction for, let's say the last 10 years or so of my career.
That's interesting. You talked about the environmental impact. In what ways does Augmenta contribute to sustainable building practices and reducing material waste?
There's actually a number of ways, right? So it's really fascinating. Again, it's something that is very peculiar to construction, right? So there are some really interesting reports that actually show how up to a third of the construction materials that are spec'd for a construction project that are brought to a construction site actually don't even end up into the buildings, right? So they're scrap material or excess material that then either thrown in the landfill or recycled. But the embodied carbon, right? So the famous embodied carbon, right, in buildings is not just what ends up in the building, but there's all this other material, right? So that's just not there, but it's still transported, it's still dug out of the ground, etc. Right? So more precision in the designs, right? So means less rework, fewer mistakes, fewer surprises in the construction site, a tighter handle of the supply chain. So this means, again, less waste, like a lot less waste, right? So our aim is really kind of reducing the amount of waste, right? So wasted materials actually to zero, or to as close as possible to zero. That's one critical aspect. The other, like, main aspect of sustainability is the operational efficiency of buildings, right? So buildings can be very bad or actually quite good at using, electricity and energy resources in general, right? So, and that's why they contribute, to greenhouse emissions, right? So greenhouse gas emissions, actually, almost like no other industry, no other, human endeavor, right? So we can do something about it. And what we can do is that having artificial intelligence apply to building design, and especially to the systems that power building, right? So we can make them efficient by default. And this is actually a critical point, right? So because today it's only the, let's say, tip of the spear kind of buildings is really the kind of top-notch construction that can afford, the top-level architects, the expensive engineers, or that have the time and the budget, right? So to optimize, to tune, like, intensely, right? So the design of not just the envelope of building, but everything inside it, right? So to make it efficient, to make it sustainable, right? So we want to democratize that, right? So we want to lower the barrier. We want to make it not a afterthought, right? So we want essentially building performance to be actually inherent part of the design process all the time, even for projects that normally can't afford to do it, right? So that to us actually is it's literally one of the reasons we started the company.
All right, quick break to talk about my book, Construction Genius. This is what I want you to do. Go to Amazon, search for the book, read all of the 5-star reviews, because there's a ton of them. Over 50 to be precise. And the reason I want you to read them is because real people wrote those reviews who've actually read the book. And it'll give you an idea of why you should go and buy a copy right now on Amazon. And here's the deal. If you purchase 10 or more copies for your company, and then send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, I'll come in via Zoom and do a 1-hour Q&A and a bonus training session with your team at no charge. I normally charge $4,500 for an hour of my time. And again, for you, I'll do it at no charge if you buy 10 or more copies of my book. And the reason you should buy it is all in the title. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So if you're in the construction industry, this book is for you. So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Audible in the audio version as well, narrated by yours truly. And I know you'll really enjoy it. So go out and get the book. And now back to the interview. That's so interesting. I was having a conversation with a gentleman who was talking about AI democratizing information. And you use this phrase, democratizing building performance. That's right. Fascinating. And it's so interesting to think about that, the potential of AI to give access to these designs and therefore to the sustainability impacts that come from those designs to all companies, regardless of what their budget looks like. I never really thought of it that way. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? That's kind of fascinating there.
100%. And again, like, I tell a story around because, it kind of warms my heart, but essentially the first building that was ever constructed, right? So with the help of our AI, right? So it only did a portion of it, like, by all means, right? So it's the electrical systems. Nevertheless, right? So the first building is a public school in rural Michigan. So, it's not, and it's not a luxury resort.
Yeah, right.
So it's not a skyscraper tower, right? So it's exactly the type of building that, generally speaking, is done in a hurry. Right. So then the margins are paper thin. And so, there's not a lot of affordance to actually do things well. Right. So that's really kind of a testament. Right. So we're trying to actually get all new built, all, reconfigurations of buildings. Right. So to be as efficient as possible. Right. So the interesting part is that I'm not necessarily saying that the AI can do a better job. Right. So, but it can show options. It can put in front of people the compromises that they're making. So it can be clear. The impact of their decision is clear, right? So they can evaluate a number of opportunities, right? So instead of just having the time to do one, right? So, and that is critical. That information, to your point, actually, it is in fact actually democratization of information, right? So essentially the affordances are the information that can make people, reason and make the right choices, like for all buildings, instead of only the ones that have, again, enough time to do it.
No, that's interesting. So with that in mind, as we look to the next 5 to 10 years, and obviously I'm asking you for your opinion here, but where do you see the construction industry heading in the next decade or so? And what role will Augmenta play in that future?
So massive disclaimer, obviously, right? So it's absolutely my opinion.
This is not investment information.
That's right, not investment information by any stretch of imagination, right? So, but yeah, so the reason I see it is verticalization. So I see more essentially intense integration, right? So between different players, different stakeholders in the value chain, right, of construction, right? So I think the demand for efficiency, schedule compression, again, skill shortages, right? So are going to force their hand, right? So to have a fewer number of players own kind of more of the process, right? So the way I see it is that technologies like ours, right? So are meant to inspire that, are meant to have people essentially sit around the table and quickly have the information that they need to make decisions, to make very informed decisions, right? So that's really kind of the way I see it, right? So it will be more, again, a battle of supply chains. It'll be a battle of integrated, very, very vertically integrated organizations, right? So that have the ability to take the intent of a developer, of an owner, right? So and transform it into something built, right? So the shorter the queue, the more compact, if you will, the more integrated, and technology can help that actually, and the better, the higher the margin, the higher the sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really kind of the direction that I see this taking.
So with that integration in mind, you all have started in the electrical side of the business, so to speak. Where do you see your company going from there in terms of other parts of the trades?
Absolutely. So again, as I said, right, so we're kind of marching kind of backwards from the construction site, if you will, back towards an architecture. So the way we're actually moving is expanding into the mechanical and plumbing trades, right? So
why did you choose electrical to begin with? I'm just curious.
Oh, that's a great question, actually. So there's a number of reasons, actually. So first, electricians are bullied. So what I mean is that they are the last ones who have access to the designs, right? So, and they have to rush to coordination meetings with nothing in their BIM models, right? So when they're already late, they win a bid, they actually get the bid package that already has, a bunch of stuff actually from the mechanical and plumbing engineers, and they have to populate with BIM models, essentially everything else, right? So we're trying to actually get them to shorten their workflow first, because in the grand scheme of things, we can actually make it the fastest for so the aggregated schedule, if you will. Right? So that's kind of a big reason for that. Also because, again, electricians have, let's say, the luxury in this case that they have to contend with gravity less than their colleagues, right? So in mechanical and plumbing engineering, right? So they don't have to have sloped drains. There's reasons, there's no friction losses. Yes, of course, there are power losses by, the length of the conductors, right? So, but it's less critical. They can move around things more freely, more easily than the other systems, right? So we wanted to give them the best bang for the buck first. On the other side, there is actually also a technological reason, right? So we examined the building codes, right? So, and from a purely computational perspective, we found that automatically designing electrical system is the hardest thing to do, right? So and not to detract anything from the complexity of designing, plumbing or mechanical systems or structure by all means, right? So, but from a geometry, from an understanding, from a nuance, it's just extremely complex. So we started there to prove to ourselves that the technology choices, right? So the fundamental technological choices that we made are applicable and that translate to the other trades, to many of the other trades, without painting ourselves into a corner that we couldn't then overcome, right? So now that we know that we can do electrical, right? So the other trades will be, it's a downhill effort, if you will. Right? It's non-trivial, but still, it's just simpler.
Interesting. What are the main insights that you've learned with the electrical side of the business that you're taking into mechanical and plumbing and the other areas?
we're learning a lot about the process of coordination, right? So we're learning a lot about how, engineers actually work, subcontractors that work on the same project, like the way, again, the trade-offs actually get made, the nuances of different types of buildings, right? So the criticality that exists in, data centers, for example, that doesn't exist in a school, or literally it's nuances of hospitals, versus, manufacturing facilities. So it's a fantastic actually learning process, really, right? So, and that actually allows us also to shape the future agents that we're building, the future workflows, right, for fully integrated MEP and further, right? So in a way that is respectful to these nuances, right? So to these differences and peculiarities of the different types of buildings.
That's interesting. So what advice would you give to a construction company owner who's listening to this in terms of how they should be engaging with AI? I mean, what's the bare minimum that they should be doing in order to, maybe they're saying, I don't want to be on the bleeding edge, but I don't want to be left behind. So what's the bare minimum a CEO of a construction company should be doing right now as they're thinking through the AI innovations that are out there?
So I would say at the very least, let's say collect and corral your data, right? So at the very least, right? So I think data is one of the foundations of any modern artificial intelligence, right? So data comes in all the fashions, right? So, and yes, it is difficult. Not all, organizations, right? So in any industry actually are diligent in collecting, data in a structured manner, right? So, but that is really kind of the first step, right? So on the other hand, listen to these types of calls, right? Essentially understand what's coming because it is coming.
Yes.
Right. So, and I'm not saying just Augmenta, right? So what I mean is that artificial intelligence will be a tool in your arsenal, in your tool belt, right? So that will make an impact to the industry. Like it's a matter of when, right? So it certainly is a matter of when. So kind of be prepared to embrace it and use it, proficiently rather than fighting it, right? So as the saying actually goes, right? So it's the saying about, people whose job will be replaced by AI, but it's actually a difference, right? So is people who don't use AI or don't actually become very proficient in using AI that will lose their jobs, right? So it's not the jobs themselves, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's really interesting. So that there's the one thing I would say to someone, even if you're not even if you're reluctant, is you should begin using the technology, even at the most basic level. And going back to what you said earlier, the idea of mastering asking the right questions and then providing feedback for whatever tool you're using, that can help you to get comfortable with what it feels like to work with an AI model.
100%. I couldn't agree more. It's spot on. It really is that skill that is one of the traits of the new generation, right?
Yes,
of skills.
It's fundamental, and it is a skill. It's one that it does require your creativity and your expertise. Again, you should begin to think in this way and begin to hone that skill because it's going to be essential for the foreseeable future.
Precisely.
So tell us a little bit more about Augmenta. And really what I'd like you to say is, who is your ideal customer? Who's the person listening to today's episode that absolutely has to contact you?
Absolutely. So Augmenta is a wonderful company. I mean, it's we're really kind of dedicated. We're on a mission here, right? So that's really maybe the difference, right? So we're not here for considering this as just a job, right? As I said, I mean, we literally the name kind of speaks for itself, right? So it's we're very ambitious. I'm not going to deny it, right? So, but at the same time, we're humble in that we're not trying to come up with something and try to teach people how to do their jobs, right? So we're trying to be very good listeners, if you will, right? That there's one characteristic of Augmenta, that's just the one, right? So, and second is the highly technical skills that we do possess. On the other hand, again, the people who should definitely actually talk to us are folks by all means, in the electrical kind of construction kind of field at the very least, right? So electrical contractors and electrical engineers, right? So, but to be fair, I think that general contractors should start paying attention because, again, the coordination process is something that involves them kind of directly. They own kind of portions of it, or at least, they own the schedule. And so technology like this, as we move to the other trades, will become kind of more and more kind of participant to the coordination process. And in fact, actually, our goal is to eliminate the coordination process entirely, right? So by having the multiple trades co-designed, right? So by artificial intelligence, right? So So they should start at the very least acknowledging and paying attention, right? So if not talking to us instantaneously, but it's coming.
That's great. And what are some of the GCs, because it's interesting, what are some of the GCs that you guys have worked with and have shown interest in your platform?
So, I mean, some of them actually have NDAs, so I can't mention their names directly. But what I mean is that they are progressive in the sense that they see coming a time when they can take, at least part ownership of the design,
yes.
right? So of the design process, right? Yep. So where they have the visibility at the very least of the design process, right? So they understand again that it's going to be indeed a battle of supply chains, right? So and not just a battle of brands and firms, right? And so they're trying to position themselves as like in the direction of the vertical integration or in the direction of much, much closer communication and data knowledge and sharing actually between themselves and their trade partners. Right? So that's really kind of the characteristics, if you will, of the GCs that we're talking to that are in that trajectory, following that trajectory, or starting to actually follow that trajectory.
That's great. And how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, so they can be in touch with me directly on LinkedIn, right? So, or by all means on our website, augmenta.ai.
Excellent. And you said you're up in Toronto, is that right?
That's correct. Yes,
okay, so what's the one restaurant that someone should go to when they visit Toronto?
One restaurant to visit Toronto. Wow. I mean, I'll have to, be Italian kind of that way, right? So, yep. And so for a good kind of selection of pretty much anything Italian, I would recommend Terroni.
Okay, and how do you spell that?
Terroni.
Terroni. There it is.
It's not the fanciest. It's not the worst. It's a very hits the spot for Italian. It really hits the spot.
That's excellent. We will have a link in the show notes to that restaurant. So if anyone's in Toronto, they can hit it up. Frio, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us on Construction Genius.
The pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yep. Hi, this is Eric. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, found it insightful and helpful. I have a quick request. Please share the episode with other people in your company and across the industry that you think would benefit from listening to it. And also, give the podcast a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it may be. Drop us a like, drop us a comment on YouTube. Do what you can to spread the good word about the Construction Genius podcast. I really appreciate any help that you can give me, and I look forward to catching you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.